The two-day event of the United States Agricultural Outlook Forum took off yesterday in Arlington in the United States. And of course, it was a gathering of those who are top leaders, policymakers, investors, and everyone who's in the world of agriculture. And it was the Nigerian-born Akinwumi Adesina, who is the president of the African Development Bank and the World Food Prize 2017 laureate, that gave the opening remarks there. And he spoke very extensively. And of course, you know, Akinwumi Adesina will always speak to the African side of agriculture. How do we get the roots of prosperity of agriculture on the continent moving? The AFDB is looking to about $24 billion investments in Africa's agriculture and food sustainability over the next 10 years, and Nigeria is on top of where those monies will be coming from. Let's take a listen to what Akinwumi Adesina told the audience yesterday in Arlington in the United States.
Has the potential to completely transform Africa and also to feed the world. But as my mentor, the late and renowned American Dr. Norman Borlaug always said, you can't eat potential. You can only leverage, transform, and use it. To do this, we must fundamentally change the way we look at agriculture. Agriculture, for way too long, has been treated as a development activity, a social sector. It has been treated as a sector for managing poverty. Hence, intentions and policies tend not to be structural, but rather palliative for poverty alleviation. I do not believe in poverty reduction. I believe in wealth creation. The lenses with which we look at issues determines how we address them, either to see challenges or opportunities. Because over 70% of the world's population in African countries live in rural areas and depend on agriculture for a living. Their pathway out of poverty is tied to what happens to agriculture. By making agriculture a big wealth-creating sector, we will unleash new economic opportunities that will lift hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. We must also relook at received economic theory on the role of agriculture in economic growth and development. The conventional theory is that agriculture is a primary sector, and that as economies develop, labor should move out of agriculture to spur industrial development. Now, this theory has led to underinvestment in agriculture, rural development, and reinforced the culture of neglect of rural areas. Indeed, agriculture was viewed as a primary production sector to produce raw materials. That is why industries are located in the urban areas and raw materials are extracted, either from rural areas to feed those industries or simply for export. Joblessness, deepening poverty, and rural-urban migration all stem from conditions of misery in rural areas. We must now turn the rural areas from zones of economic misery to zones of economic prosperity. This requires total transformation of the agricultural sector. At the core of this must be rapid agricultural industrialization. We must not just focus on primary production, but on the development of agricultural value chains. That way, Africa, where I come from, will turn from being at the bottom of the global value chains to being at the top of those global value chains. Take the case of cocoa. Let me just see by a show of hands how many of you love eating chocolates. Oh, wonderful. Well, how many of you realize that the reason you eat chocolates is because of Africa? Oh, not much. That's because 75% of global production of cocoa beans actually comes from Africa. But a share of Africa in the chocolate market, which is about roughly $100 billion a year, Africa gets only 2% of that. So what's the brain surgery in making chocolates? The price of cocoa beans always falls. but never the price of chocolates. The price of coffee beans always falls, but never the price of brewed coffee at Starbucks. To drive the agricultural industrialization of Africa and revive its rural economies, the African Development Bank is investing $24 billion in agriculture over the next 10 years. Now, when you elect the president of a multilateral development bank with a background in agriculture, no surprises there. That's where we're going to put our money where our mouths are. At the core of this is to raise agricultural productivity. Good progress has been made. With the support of global leaders, including the late, renowned Dr. Norman Borlaug, I helped to organize action and galvanize action around what's called the Africa Fertilizer Summit in 2006. Since then, the average fertilizer use in Africa has risen from what used to be an average of about 8 kilograms per hectare, now going to close to 50 kilograms per hectare. Billions of dollars have gone into fertilizer manufacturing in Morocco, Nigeria, and other countries. Today, hundreds of thousands of farm input retailers are spread all across Africa. Hundreds of private seed companies have emerged, and through the support of the Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa, where I used to work as vice president years ago, and our Rockefeller Foundation, their support, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, things have really turned around. Ladies and gentlemen, Africa today has a lot more technologies than Asia had at the time of the Green Revolution. What's missing and what's critically needed now is to take technologies to scale of tens of millions of farmers. Africa does not need little pilots of projects anymore. We need scale. That is why the African Development Bank has launched in partnership with the World Bank, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Alliance for Green Revolution in Africa, and other partners, a new $1 billion initiative that we call Technologies for African Agricultural Transformation, or simply put, in the acronym TAAT.